What's up guys? In this video, I'm going to show you step-by-step instructions for full disassembly of a WE Tech G18c slide. Once the slide has been removed from the lower, simply pull out the return spring and the return spring guide. Next, remove the outer barrel and hop-up assembly all in one by pushing the unit forward and then pulling it out. To remove the nozzle assembly and selector switch, unscrew the Phillips head screw in the back of the slide. With the screw completely removed, the rear sight and the inner bracket will fall free, as the screw we just removed is used to hold these two together. The inner bracket resets in the slide like so. It should only go in one way and result in being flush. With the inner bracket removed, we can now see the spring mechanism that interacts with the selector switch. To remove the selector switch, apply pressure to the spring, relieving the pressure from the selector switch. The switch can now be pushed up and away from you until the notch in the selector switch will exit the window in the frame of the slide. This part may be hard to see, but there is a very small spring and detent pin that will fall free from the selector switch once it's removed. As you can see, mine fell out, so be careful not to lose these pieces as they are necessary for your selector switch to snap into place. The spring and the detent pin belong in this small hole here in the selector switch. I highly recommend putting all your small pieces into a Rubbermaid or a container like I did. You would hate to lose any of these small parts. With the selector switch removed, the spring-loaded piece will now fall freely from the slide. Now that all the hardware holding the nozzle assembly in place has been removed, simply pinch and pull the nozzle straight out to remove the assembly. The small aesthetic piece from the slide will fall free. It just rests in the slide and is held in by the nozzle assembly. And last but not least, remove the front sight. Simply remove the screw from the bottom side. Now your slide is completely stripped. You may have a rubber piece towards the front that makes contact with the return spring. It is simply pulled out. You can see where it goes in the assembly portion of this video. Alright, it's a few days later, let's reassemble this Glock. I like to lay out all of my hardware and make sure I have all the required parts. Now, the reason I disassembled my Glock was because I'm doing a few internal upgrades, but more importantly, I hydro dipped my slide. You may see some new pieces getting installed here, but I assure you the entire process is the same as if we were putting back together the stock gun. There are just new pieces going in. First is the easiest part, putting the front sight back in. I'm replacing my front and rear sights with the Angel Custom rear mount base kit. These are just new rear and front sight pieces. Moving to the back of the slide, before we start the nozzle assembly, we need to insert the aesthetic piece back into the slide. It just gets pushed into place and will remain put when the nozzle is laid on top. Once that piece is firmly in place, grab the nozzle assembly and the rear cap and begin to line it up in the slide. Be sure to push the nozzle unit straight down so that it is flush in all areas. I then like to test the nozzle return spring by making sure the nozzle snaps back into place when pushed forward. With the nozzle assembly in place, now it's time to get the selector switch back in. Place down the piece with a spring and place it in so it's flush and bounces as it should. So remember, the selector switch has 3 parts: the switch, a spring, and a detent pin. It may be tough to see, but the spring and detent pin will line up in a hole on the side of the selector switch. Place the pieces in, spring first and then detent pin. With the spring and detent pin in place, begin to feed the notch of the selector switch through the window of the slide. Keep in mind that the contents of the slide will fall out unless you hold them in place. With the selector switch lined up, I like to use a flathead screwdriver to push down on the detent pin and allow the selector switch to snap into place. Now to get the selector switch over to the semi and full auto modes, push down on the spring piece from beneath. This will allow the selector switch to be moved towards you, locking into the semi and full auto positions as usual. Next up is the bracket that holds everything into place. Simply place it into position. It will only go flush in one way. This part can be done whenever, but be sure to put back the rubber spacer in the front of the slide if it happened to fall out. To secure the blowback housing, all we need to do now is reattach the rear sight. Like I said, I'm replacing mine with the new Angel Custom upgrade kit, so I'll be putting this chunky rail in the position of the rear sight. I highly recommend changing out your plastic sights for some nice aftermarket metal ones. They provide a more secure base for your blowback housing unit to screw into and eliminates the possibility of stripped plastic. The rear sight simply gets pushed into place and is secured with the same screw as before. So everything looks good, my selector switch is working as it should. Time to put the inner and outer barrel back in and see how it looks. This is the exact same outer barrel as before. I simply stripped all the paint off of it for that polished silver look. Slide your inner barrel and hop-up unit into the outer barrel and feed the outer barrel through the slide as you normally would. I'm replacing my original return spring and return spring guide with a custom short stroke kit I made. But the spring and spring guide go in the same way no matter what. Feed it through the front of the slide and place the rear of the spring in place towards the hop-up unit. Now let's put the slide back on the lower and see how we did. The upgrades I installed should vastly increase the rate of fire. Let's see. So as you can see, with the stock parts installed, my rate of fire was 14 rounds per second. With my custom short stroke kit installed, the rate of fire went up to 18 rounds per second. This is important because I added a lot of weight to my slide with the rail system and red dot. Upgrading the rate of fire was crucial so that I don't actually lose rate of fire and adding more weight for the slide to have to shift back and forth with the air pressure. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If you want to see my full custom G18C build, the link is in the description below. Until next time, guys, I'll see ya.